a lot on this programme over the last few months, as you're all well aware. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about the hostage situation, because I think that's one side of this, which in some ways, bizarrely, I think has been a little neglected in recent weeks. And yet 136 men, women and children are still being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. There are, 108 of them are still alive. 28 we know have been killed. There are 15 women among the 108. There are 2 children. And I just wonder why they seem to have fallen off the media agenda. And everything is now all about what's going on in the Red Sea. Everything concerns the statistics that Hamas give out. And I think it's time to redress that. Well, we have an opportunity in this hour because there are 4 relatives of hostages are in London at the moment, and they're here to try and persuade the British government to put pressure on the Qatari government to in turn put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. I have with me Liran Berman, whose twin brothers are hostages. Liran, thank you for coming to see us. And also Calev, who's an Israeli lawyer and civil rights activist who leads the Voice for Freedom coalition, which has been appointed to represent the hostages' families. Calev, if I can come to you, by the way, they're happy to take your calls, so if you'd like to talk to them over the course of the next hour, they're going to be here with me until 8. The number to call 0345 6060 973. Now, Calev, I said the aim was to persuade the British government to put pressure on the Qataris, yes. But it's the Qataris that are hosting the Hamas leadership, isn't it?
Not only hosting Hamas leadership, but they give about £350 million every year to Hamas. And 2 weeks ago, they declared that, again, they would renew this in 2024. It's not a secret. So it's a massive amount of money. And they're hosting all the top 3 senior leaders of Hamas in Doha as we speak. And they have complete leverage over Hamas. We know that if Qatar wants the hostages to be released, they'll be released tomorrow.
So what pressure can Britain, in particular, I know you've been to Washington, presumably other European capitals as well, but in particular, what can Britain do to put pressure on?
Britain can do a lot to put pressure on Qatar. I don't know if your listeners are aware of this, but Qatar owns more real estate, apparently, in the city of London than the royal family. And so, similar to the United States, France, Paris, they purchase hotels, they invest...
Football teams,
exactly. And they invest a lot in their image in the West. It's very important to them. And Great Britain is very important to them. The relationship with Great Britain is very important to them. And if they were to understand that until the hostages are released, they wouldn't be able to continue doing business in Great Britain. People wouldn't stay at the Harrods Hotel, which they own, and go to the Saint-Germain Paris football club. They would effectively abstain from doing business with Qatar until the hostages are released. That would make a big difference.
Do we have to differentiate here, though, between the Qatari government and the Qatari companies that own real estate in the United Kingdom? Because it would surely be unfair to sanction private companies for the actions of their government.
The primary companies doing business in Great Britain are owned by the royal family. It's a small country. And everybody who, all the ambassadors are cousins to the emir. The leaders of those companies are all part of the Al Thani family, the royal family in Qatar. There's really no separation.
Liran, let me turn to you. Now, it's your twin brothers, who are they're 26 years old, Ziv and Gali. I'm sure every interviewer asks this question, but I think it's important for our listeners to understand from a family point of view sort of what you went through on that awful day on the 7th of October. When were you first aware that something was wrong?
So I woke up at 6:30 in the morning to the sounds of alarms and sirens, like the whole of Israel. I'm the only one who doesn't live in Kfar Aza anymore. My entire family lives in Kfar Aza. My mother, my father, and 3 of my brothers.
And this is a community just
small
over the
community.
border from the Gaza fence.
It's a kilometer and a half from the city of Gaza, not from the
Right.
border,
Okay.
from the city itself, just in the center of the Gaza Strip. We woke up at 6:30. At 7:30, we saw the first pickup truck with terrorists in the city of Sderot, which is 7 minutes drive from our kibbutz. We texted among ourselves in the family group, in the message group, and the kibbutz group. In the morning, they sound shouting in Arabic and gunshots, which is very weird. It never happened before. We thought it was going to be 4 terrorists, and the military will handle them, and it will be over. As the hour progressed, we realized it's something different. It's something much bigger.
And all this time you're messaging each other?
All the time, yeah. And in the morning, everyone answered and were relatively safe in their safe rooms. You need to understand, and listener need to understand that safe rooms are a bomb shelter integrated in the house against missiles. What happened on October 7, we weren't prepared for this. People were staying in their safe room, which was the opposite of safe. We lost contact with my little brothers at 9:30, and at 10 they stopped answering the messages. We tried calling them. The phone was dead. My parents got rescued by the IDF during fighting at midnight between Saturday and Sunday, and my other brother Idan got rescued on Sunday afternoon. He was in the last group of survivors from Kfar Aza who got rescued. And then for 10 days we waited for something. We didn't know what. We were afraid that we are going to get the call to come recognize their bodies, because we knew and we saw the photos that where they lived in the youngsters' neighborhood, there was the worst fighting in Kfar Aza. Actually, the fighting was finished there on Monday, only on Monday, which began on October 7th in the morning and ended on Monday afternoon. So for 10 days, they were considered missing. We weren't hopeful at all. We heard the rumors of people getting burned alive, people getting beheaded, bodies disfigured. So we realized the long period of time was for the medical practitioner to separate the bodies or to recognize them. 10 days after October 7, official officers came to us and informed us that my brothers are kidnapped. The listener needs to understand that absurdly, we were happy with this announcement. It's a weird world where you get informed that your brothers are kidnapped, and it's the better option out of the two, because the other one, we need to bury my 2 little brothers.
Yeah.
So 10 days after, we got realized that they get kidnapped and they've been held captive in Gaza. And then we started to fight to release them.
And have you got proof? I mean, that they are alive? Have they been able to message you in any way?
Not to message us in any way, and we haven't got visual confirmation. No video, CCTV, nothing. But the released hostages who got released for 54 days after told us and the IDF officer that they saw them.
Right.
Separately. They weren't together. Each had minor injuries, but in the tunnels, minor injuries can turn into severe injuries quickly. No treatment, of course not by Hamas, and the Red Cross hasn't visited any hostages. So even minor injuries can turn severe. They have no sunlight. They have very limited food. They were kidnapped from their house on a Saturday morning, so we have no idea with what clothes they were kidnapped with. Maybe boxers or pajama. It's now wintertime in the tunnels. Yeah, so we got proof of life, but it helps, but the war is still here. We are still deeply worried.
And there seems to be a lot of disquiet among families of hostages with the actions of the Israeli government. Yesterday, I think many of them effectively took over the Parliament building and I think entered the chamber of the Knesset. Clearly, there's a lot of disquiet about the policy that Benjamin Netanyahu has pursued. What would you like him to do? Because obviously, I mean, he's more influential over what's going to happen than the British government can ever be.
I hope that he goes to sleep with my brother's pictures in his mind and he wake up to them every morning. I hope that he's doing whatever he can. We need a deal of the hostages, because we saw that the last deal was the only option to get hostages back alive. I can't blame the families who got interrupted into the Knesset, into the parliament. I can really understand them. I don't want to be in the decision-making shoes. I know that they don't want to be in my shoes right now. I'm not a political person, so I don't know what's right, what's wrong, diplomatic-wise or negotiation-wise, decision-wise. I have no idea. I just know that I want my brothers back by any means necessary. I need them with me.
And I suppose when you look at it from the outside, it seems that the Israeli government understandably wants to get Hamas. They want to kill the terrorists. I have absolutely no issue with that. But it seems that that is the bigger priority than getting the hostages back. That's just how it seems here. Is that how you feel that they're approaching this?
Sometimes this is why we are doing what we are doing in Israel and everywhere in the world, to keep pressure on a deal. Because we can deal with Hamas. We are dealing with Hamas for 40 years. We can continue to deal with them after. But the hostages doesn't have that time. The hostages need... Every minute is crucial. Every minute they are there, it's like a year of torture for them, for sure. But the circles around them, we are suffering also. And we can deal with everything after they will be back.
Well, we're going to come to your calls shortly, 0345 6060 973. Liran and Calev are happy to take your calls and to answer any questions that you may have. But if you want to call in to express your solidarity with Liran and his family, and indeed the families of all the other hostages, you're very welcome to do so. All I would say is that sometimes this whole conflict provokes some severe emotions and reactions with some people. I would just ask people to be very respectful of both of my guests in the studio today. It's 18 minutes past 7.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
How will people fall in love with the railways if their journey is disrupted by industrial action?
Straight to the point.
People would rather go to the dentist than vote Conservative.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Well, these are your candidates who totally disagree with you.
Listen on your radio and Global Player, the official LBC app.
21 minutes past 7. You're listening to Iain Dale. The reason that we're streaming this hour live on Global Player is because we have with us Liran Berman, who is the older brother of 26-year-old twins Ziv and Gali Berman, who were kidnapped by Hamas, taken hostage on the 7th of October. Also with us, Calev, who is a lawyer and civil rights activist, and he leads the Voice for Freedom Coalition, which has been appointed to represent the hostages' families. Now, Liran, you met the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Was it today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
How did that go?
First of all, I thanked him because he was one of the first prime ministers to come to Israel after October 7. And all through the time, he was very supportive of Israel and the families. So I thanked him first of all. Then I urged him and pleaded him to continue the pressure on Qatar and to continue the international pressure on Hamas to release all the hostages, because Prime Minister Rishi has a lot of power as the United Kingdom Prime Minister, and we know that England is one of the most powerful nations in Europe, of course, and in the world. So if this powerful man can help, then I pleaded him to do whatever he can.
It's interesting you say that, because there is a school of thought in this country that thinks that we don't have any influence on this at all. There's really nothing that Britain can do. It's all about America rather than what we can do. But then you look at our history in that region, and I mean, that, in a sense, confers some influence. And what did Rishi Sunak say to you? Did he reassure you?
He reassured us. Me and the other families. He told us that he will do whatever in his power to help us. This is a humanitarian cause, and this is not a political cause at all. Releasing civilian hostages is a humanitarian cause first of all. So he promised us that he will do whatever he can.
And did you get any hope from the conversation that he could exert some influence over the Qataris?
I will take any hope that I can get. So yes. We will have to wait and see, but yes, I will take every hope.
How much does this whole situation play on your mind? I mean, is it something that you're literally constantly thinking about, or can you ever escape it?
No, we can't escape anything. This is our life now. Some family members say that they are dead men walking. We are not walking. I'm a father. I'm not the best father right now. I'm a husband. I am not the best husband right now. What I'm doing 24/7 is what I'm doing right now. Speak about my brothers, fighting the diplomatic war to release them 24/7. We can't sleep. We barely eat. This is our life.
We're coming to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. Before we do, though, Calev, have you learnt anything from the communications policies of the Ukrainian government here? And you may think that's a rather odd question, but I think they have been absolutely brilliant in taking their message to world capitals to explain what they're doing. They send a lot of their MPs to London. And I've had them round this table, and it's sort of inspirational, the stories that they have to tell. I don't know whether you've sort of looked at that as to how to deploy those tactics in your campaign, but it seems to me that the Israeli government, and I emphasise the government here, had the world's sympathy for the first few days of this, and then somehow history repeated itself, because there have been many occasions in the past where Israel has had the world's sympathy and then gone in all guns blazing, and then support starts to dissipate. And that seems to me to be what's happened here.
Right. I don't know much about the modus operandi of Ukraine and the Ukrainian government in Great Britain. I do know that from the first time we started taking these delegations to meet with decision leaders throughout the world, we were the first meeting with for instance, the president of the Red Cross in Geneva and the High Commissioner of Human Rights of the United Nations. And we did go to Washington, D.C. and Brussels and Strasbourg and Paris, etc. Every time we've met face to face with the government leaders, and people like Liran were able to tell their personal stories, tears flowed. And it's that emotional connection that actually motivates people to action, and that's what we need more than ever is action, and so we see the effectivity of that.
Right, let's go to a call. It's Khaled in Leicester. Hello, Khaled.
Fine. And is it Liran, you said? And sorry.
Liran and Calev.
Liran, Calev, yeah, sorry. Just a quick question, Liran. I mean, obviously, it's been traumatic for yourself since the 7th of October. I can understand. If you can just explain what emotions you've been going through. I mean, obviously, the trauma initially was there, the shock, obviously, elation that he was still alive, you can say, your brother. But I mean, in the sense that, what sort of emotions have you been going through on a daily basis? And how have you been coping with that, first of all?
Thank you for the question. Emotions: depressed, tired, worry. It's a roller coaster of emotion, specifically on the bad side of emotions. We have no good days. We have fine moments, okay days. The night time is the worst when you're alone with your thoughts. A lot of us got medication for sleep. It's a roller coaster of emotion, primarily on the bad side of emotion. We are trying to find good moments throughout our days, but the main thing is that we remain very focused on our goal, and the goal is to release my brothers.
Because, I mean, emotions affect people very differently. You said to me outside the studio that you don't get too emotional. I mean, and I try to put myself in your situation. I mean, how can I? But I think I would be very, very emotional. But in the end, sort of breaking down in tears doesn't help bring your family back, does it?
Yeah. I think I finished my tears in the beginning 10 days of the war. I went to 11 funerals in 10 days of people I grew up with friends, people I care deeply about. So after the 11th funeral, I think I finished all my tears. Like you said, crying about it won't help, so we need to do.
But I suspect when they're released, and I say when, not if, when they're released, there'll be a few more.
Yeah, of course. I keep in my last one for those.
Khaled, did you have any other things you wanted to ask?
Just a quick question, Ron. I mean, do you think, this is my, personally, if I was there, I know what I'd be doing as far as negotiation is concerned. Do you think that all the citizens like yourself, etc., should push the government, the Israeli government, to release, make an exchange? I know you're doing yours from your side, but I think because, look, since the 7th of October, according to what I understand, hundreds, if not a few thousand of people have been taken into the Israeli prisons on detention without charge, just randomly taken into the... So would it be practical to push the Israeli government to do a prisoner exchange so that, push them, really push them, whatever it takes to push them for this, so that way we can have, that can be put forward to Qatar, who can negotiate this deal, so that immediately...
Well, of course, there was a prisoner exchange in the previous ceasefire, wasn't there? Calev, if you want to come in on this.
Well, I think that in all the deals that have been discussed, they've been the issue of prisoner exchange has been put on the table. But I think it's very important not to look with equanimity at the innocent Israeli civilians taken from their beds, taken from their homes by vicious terrorists into captivity and kept 40 meters underground in Gaza without access to food, water. They're given half a pita a day, a little bit of water. We know of sexual abuse of the women in these circumstances. Comparing that to the way that Palestinians who are guilty of terrorist actions and terrorist intents and treated with silk gloves in Israeli prisons. There's no comparison between these.
How can you say they're guilty if they haven't actually been charged? They're being detained without charge. A lot of them.
People who are arrested are people which our intelligence services consider to be ticking bombs, who have expressed serious intent to carry out violent crimes.
Yes, but there should be a judicial process there, rather than just sort of arresting people, banging them up in prison without any court procedure at all. That, to most democracies, would be, well, it just wouldn't be allowed to happen.
Yeah, I understand. I don't think that most democracies deal with the same type of security issues that Israel deals with.
True.
Hamas is an organization that in its official charter calls for the annihilation of the Jewish people. And when people actively not only identify with Hamas but participate in the planning of terrorist activities, sometimes there isn't time to go through the judicial process to...
I think that the point is, obviously there isn't an equivalence here, but pragmatism has to be the way forward. I mean, which is presumably why, I mean, I was very surprised that Netanyahu even agreed to a deal to release, was it a couple of hundred of Palestinian prisoners. I mean, pragmatism has to be the name of the game, doesn't it?
Yes, and I'm not saying that I don't support a deal. I do support a deal of prisoner swaps. I just don't like the comparison between the type of prisoners that are sitting in Israeli detention and the hostages.
Khalid, thank you very much for your call. We'll take more of your calls in just a few moments' time. It's 7:32 on LBC. Let's get the latest news headlines with Amelia Cox.
British and US aid workers have been asked to leave Yemen by Houthi authorities. A letter has been sent to the country's UN coordinator requesting all workers with US and UK citizenship to leave within 30 days. The police watchdog is investigating after 4 bodies were found at a house near Norfolk. Among them was a man who'd called 999, saying he was concerned about his mental state. And an amber weather warning for wind has come into force in northern Scotland as Storm Jocelyn hits the UK. The train network north of the border is no longer running. LBC weather, a windy night with rain clearing in the southeast, blustery showers in the northwest. These will be heavy and thundery in Scotland, lows of 5 degrees.
This is LBC.
.36, we're talking to Liran Berman, who's the older brother of 26-year-old twins Ziv and Gali Berman, who were kidnapped by Hamas on October the 7th, and Calev who runs the Voice for Freedom Coalition, which has been appointed to represent the hostages' families. One thing which I should have asked you before, which I didn't, tell us about your brothers. What are they like? I mean, you're a little older than them, aren't you?
Yes,
have you always played the big brother role?
Yes, until a certain point. I'm 36, they are 26, we have a 10 years difference. They are each other's best friends since birth. They are doing everything together. They are working together as light technician in a sound and light company in the music industry in Israel. They support the same football teams in Israel and in England.
Liverpool. Shameful.
Sorry. But they travel around the world together. And they are my little kids' best uncles. We have a father with Parkinson and dementia, so wherever they're home, they're helping my mother all the time.
How has he coped with this?
Thankfully, dementia, he doesn't understand. He understands that he's been displaced, he's not his home, and he understands to a degree that he doesn't see his little kids. But other than that, we don't know to what degree he understands. So my mother has to cope with my father and with her two little kids being kidnapped.
Yeah.
So they travel around the world. They just been in Tomorrowland in Belgium, which is one of the biggest music festivals in the world, like 4 months ago, together with another friend who is also kidnapped from their neighborhood. We traveled as a family to Larnaca in Cyprus just a month before October 7th. They are the light of every group of friends they are with. They have twin powers.
When they're released, give it a few weeks or months, but I want them in the studio.
They will. We will come.
Your mouth to the guys here.
Right, let's go to some more calls. Jeff is in Kingston. Hello, Jeff.
Hi. In 1967, I was a volunteer in a kibbutz in Israel. I was there during the war. Immediately after that, I got married to a Belgian, and we have, because of the marriage, a large extended family in Israel, much of them in mandate times, so pre-establishment of the state. One member of the family, in fact, a large member of the family, used to live in Kfar Aza. They no longer live there, but obviously they've been pained by what's happened, to having to attend funerals after funerals of members of our extended family. So it's been tough. And my heart goes out to my Chaver speaking now, that he should have Chazak ve'amatz. We have to get through this. We'll beat them. We'll be stronger. The worst thing is that we've got Netanyahu, who may have served in Sayed Matkal before I was in Israel, but he's not a man. He's an image of a man. He wants to leave a legacy. His legacy is going to be catastrophe. We need to have people like Ehud Barak, who was a good prime minister, and we've had several others before and since. Yeah, Netanyahu is a criminal. I can't say anything more. But
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much. Just on that, Calev, I was interviewing Lord Pickles, Eric Pickles, for my All Talk podcast this afternoon, and we were talking about the need for a new generation of politicians in Israel and indeed in Palestine, and that's the only way in the long term that things are going to work, because the old politicians are never going to make a huge amount of progress. You both live in Israel. Is there this feeling that there needs to be a new beginning?
Yes, 100%. On October 6th, Israel was more divided than it's ever been since 1948, obviously over the issue of the legal reforms. After October 7th, we're more unified than we've ever been, I think, since 1948. And what you have is these sectors with this huge argument in between them, from the right and from the left and from the religious and from the secular. They were all called up together to fight at the front lines. Hundreds of thousands of people fighting shoulder to shoulder, giving their life for each other, and everybody wants a change. Everybody wants a different conversation. Everybody is looking for a conversation of unity, not of division, and new, fresh leadership. And it will happen. I think everybody, including Bibi Netanyahu, knows that his political career is over. This is the worst security failing in the history of the State of Israel, perhaps in the history of the Zionist movement. I think similar to, it's a replay of 1973, 1920, exactly 50 years later, this is more or less what happened in the Yom Kippur War. In the elections of 1974, there wasn't a massive rehaul of the political system, because when they decide to go to new elections, we have 90 days. And that's not enough time for large political movements to be structured. Right now, everybody is focused on the war. The big change when Menachem Begin came to power and ousted labor for the first time in the history of Israel was in 1977. So I think the big change will probably be around 2027, not immediately after the war. There will be a change after the war, but it won't be the huge change that will come as a reflection of.
Right, let's go to another call. It's Sam in Edgware. Hello, Sam.
Hi, good evening. First off, I'd like to say that I've got absolute sympathy with you, and I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I regularly pray for the safe return of the hostages and for the civilians in Gaza. One thing I would like to know the Israeli perspective on the ground for an end goal and how to get rid of the vicious cycle. Second point, I think many people are missing the fact that the reality of the situation is there are many successful Israeli Arab citizens right now living in Israel. Why can't that model be applied to the Palestinian areas? And what does he think can sort this out? Because right now each generation is just far right. And surely he must agree that what's happened is atrocious. Hamas must go, but the plight of the Palestinians, that needs to be addressed so that there's no vacuum for these crazy terrorist groups to hijack the agenda.
Sam, thank you. Liran?
So we all want in Israel to live in coexisting. We have no problem with any religion at all. Some of the people who lived in the kibbutzim in the Gaza Strip were some of the most peace-loving human beings ever. Some of them who got murdered by Hamas drove Palestinians from the border to hospitals in Israel. So, yes, a change need to come. The Arab Muslims in Israel have every right that I have. They study in the same universities as I do. They vote for their leadership the same as I do. They work and get money the same as I do. And I think this needs to be the situation for the Palestinians also. But their leadership needs to decide that that's what they want. They want to live in peace and coexistence with us. Because when that will happen, it will be the most beautiful place in the Middle East. But it's up to them. We want to live in coexisting. You can talk about the far right and everyone is going to the right in Israel. Those are the circumstances that drove us to there. 140,000 people, 14,000 people got butchered by a terrorist group. So, of course, the mindset will tend to the far right. But in the long term, we all want to live in coexisting. And we will.
Before all this happened, were you a political person? Would you engage in political debates? Because it must seem a very odd thing to do. So one minute you're meeting the Prime Minister in Downing Street, the next minute you're on doing media interviews like this. Presumably you'd quite like to return to a normal life.
I would love to go back to anonymity. Before this, I worked with adults with special needs, as far from politics as possible. But circumstances drove me to politics. I would love to go back to being unknown. Yeah.
Well, you might have to be part of this new generation of Israeli politicians that we've been talking about in the future. Who knows?
Maybe.
Right, we will take some more of your calls in just a few moments' time. Don't forget, cross question at 8. I'll be joined on the panel by the Executive Editor and Head of Audio for Politico Europe, Anne McElvoy, Sarah Champion, the Labour MP for Rotherham, Tobias Elwood, Conservative MP for Bournemouth East, and John Stevens, Political Editor of the Daily Mirror. We'll be looking forward to your calls. The lines are open 0345 6060 970. 073. It's 7:46.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Are you one of 14,000 people who tried to vote but were turned away because you didn't have the correct ID? Caroline in Totnes.
I really don't think it's necessary at all, and I think it is a very clear ploy to try and put off people voting who are less likely to vote for the Conservatives, particularly the younger generation.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With EDF, helping to cut carbon and cost for everyone.
Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player. LB.
$7:49 on LBC. Don't forget, cross question in just 11 minutes' time. Liran Berman and Calev Myers with me taking your calls. Let's go to Ben in Brighton. Hello, Ben.
Good evening, Ian. Ian, could I just make a simple point, which maybe is a question, but it's my truth as a parent. All children are born innocent. For any person to get to the point of doing something terrible, something must have happened, and I haven't heard any serious debate, particularly from, an Israeli side, about why someone would end up behaving like those disgusting terrorists behaved in October, because it doesn't come out of nowhere. It is created. All human behaviour is created. We are not born racist. When we are born, we don't see skin colour. We need to think about this if we are all going to live in harmony, because we can't go around killing each other. We can't go around hating each other. We have to find a way to just be harmonious. When we're born, we're innocent. So what do your panellists think happened?
Calev, let's start with you.
I agree with Ben 100%. I think nobody is born evil. I think human beings have the potential for evil, but that's not the way we're born. And some of the teenagers who attacked and committed violent acts of terror on October 7th were not even born yet when Israel withdrew all the Jews from the Gaza Strip. But they were educated on a diet of hatred of Jews. They're taught in their textbook that Jews are monkeys and pigs, and the highest calling is to be a shaheed, to kill Jews and to die in the name of Allah. It's a whole education program that's been funded by Qatar. Some of it's been funded by UNRWA, the agency of the United Nations. That absolutely needs to change. Some of these teenagers, we have recordings. They put the recordings in social network where they said, "Mom, Dad, we've killed Jews," and their parents said, "Good, go kill some more." I mean, that's the type of education that these young people have received, and it's a disaster. Whatever the solution is for moving forward has to include a significant change in the education system within Gaza.
So the United Nations is funding schools which teach this.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, it's outrageous. Liran.
Yeah. Like Calev said, it's all begin with education. When you educate your little kids to hate, this will what happen 15 years later or 20 years later. They will be terrorists. When you educate them to love and to work together, society prosper.
But the accusation from many people now is that by this action against Hamas in Gaza, Israel is creating a new generation of teenage terrorists.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. First of all, we need to get rid of Hamas. First of all. Then we need to rebuild something with the next leadership of the Palestinian. We need to build something better for everyone. Because what Hamas did for the past 40 years is educate the youth to hate. Israel is not to blame on this. Israel is not...
But some people say Israel is to blame for the fact that it's occupied Gaza. Okay, it left in 2005, I know that. But there's effectively been a blockade of Gaza. And if you have this sort of action over a period of decades, inevitably, so the argument goes, people will at some point rebel against that.
But the blockade was only to prevent the import of weapons and missiles. You could come and go as a fisherman, no problem. Yes. But if you want to import Iranian-made missiles...
Well, the use of electricity was restricted, the water supply was restricted, so it's not just
because we are dealing with a government run by terrorists. If the leadership in Gaza wanted to coexist, there would be no problems at all. Actually, we are not the only one who blockade Gaza. They have a border with Egypt. Why nobody's talking about Egypt? Egypt it's not an open border there. So it's easy to hate on Israel. We are not free from mistakes. But when you always blame Israel, you always blame Israel. There are other parties involved.
Right, Ben, thank you for that. Let's move on to Michael in Welwyn Garden City. Michael, hi.
Hello, good evening. First, I'd like to thank you, Iain, for hosting, rightly so, the families of the hostages, and it is a question as to why their voices have dropped off the media publicity. And also, obviously, I'd like to thank...
Michael, it's a terrible, terrible line. We're going to try and get you back on a better line. In the meantime, let's go to Paul in Twickenham. Hi, Paul.
Hi. And I think the grief for the hostages, that's the first thing. I feel grief for them. I feel grief for the people of Gaza, grief for the prisoners held without trial in administrative detention. Grief doesn't recognise any sort of racism. In answer to the grief that's being experienced by your guests whose relatives are in these awful conditions in, I think that all the cards are in the hand of Netanyahu. He's the biggest obstacle to sorting this out. He holds all the cards. What he could do, he could say to Hamas, we, Israel, are going to cease bombing Gaza. You, Hamas, are going to release the hostages, and we are going to release all the Palestinian prisoners held in administrative detention. We're going to do it next week or tomorrow, and after that, we are all going to go with all our confederate countries to the United Nations, and we're going to try and see what can be done. Now, frankly, Iain, I don't live in cloud cuckoo land. there are problems in the Middle East that are beyond human comprehension or solving, in my opinion, and there are forces at work of evil and hatred which we can barely begin to get to grips with. But if some people think that asking Israel to stop bombing Gaza or to declare a ceasefire is a form of surrender, this is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. Israel has all the power. The boot is on its foot. If it stopped bombing Gaza and a prisoner exchange was agreed and, some sort of conference held, and then Hamas started again to try and repeat what it said it would do on October the 7th, that's not going to happen. Israel can surround the Gaza Strip and prevent it. Surrender is not weakness. And
Paul, I'm going to leave that as a comment rather than put it to our panellists, purely because I've got 2 minutes left and I'm determined to get Michael's question in Welwyn Garden City. He's back. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Mike. Hello, Ian. Thank you. And like I said, I wanted to thank the families of the hostages for making this brave trip. I'd just like to ask them something that hasn't really been discussed, but kind of alluded to in an indirect way. Has anyone in the Muslim community, say for instance in the UK, reached out to them to discuss with them what they're going through? Because we do know that a lot of this radicalisation emanates from mosques where there are imams and mullahs preaching this stuff. And really, if there is going to be change, I don't think the discussion is about leaders on the political side, it's leaders on the religious side.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much for that. Liran.
So we get a lot of sympathy from actually Muslims in Israel. We haven't met Muslims, imams, while we delegate. We did meet with the Qatari ambassador in Washington, and he was very sympathetic to us. He is himself a family man, and he felt very griefly for our situation. But the Muslims in Israel, the Israeli Muslims, some of them got murdered in October 7th, some of them got kidnapped in October 7th, some of them got injured during October 7th. So we have a lot of sympathy because they realize that when they are Israeli, it doesn't matter if they are Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Jewish. If you are in Israel and live in Israel and prosper in the state of Israel, then you are an enemy of the radicalized Islam. Most Muslims are peace-loving people, most of them, but they have a problem with the fundamentalist Islam.
Well, time has beaten us, I'm afraid. Liran, it's been a pleasure to meet
Thank
you.
you very much.
In a way, I wish we'd never met, because you wouldn't be in this situation. You'd be living a normal life back in Israel. And Calev, congratulations on the work you're doing to try and bring about the release of the hostages. Coming up in the next hour, we will be joined on the cross-question panel by Anne McElvoy, the executive editor and head of audio for Politico Europe. Sarah Champion is Labour MP for Rotherham and chairs the International Development Select Committee. Tobias Elwood is Conservative MP for Bournemouth East. He's a former Defence Minister and former British Army officer. And John Stevens, political editor of the Daily Mirror. They are, of course, here to answer your questions. You might want to reflect on what we've been talking about over the last hour in one of your questions. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. As you can say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player.
On your radio, on Global Player.